Welcome to Consumer Connections, a podcast series brought to you by Scylla. I'm your host, James Piecowye, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Faisal Khan.
Consumer Connections is your guide to navigating the ins and outs of marketing and insights with a special focus on the Arab world and its global implications. We're thrilled to introduce you to a range of experts and leaders from the domains of strategy, marketing, and insights who will share their thoughts and real-life experiences with us. The theme of this podcast is democratizing consumer intelligence in a fast-evolving Arab region. Faisal, who's our guest today?
We are thrilled to have with us Rafik El Noumeir, VP of Insights and Analytics for Africa, Middle East, and South Asia. With over 18 years at PepsiCo, Rafik has been pivotal in shaping how the company leverages consumer insights, helping PepsiCo stay ahead of the curve. And guess what? In his spare time, he's an Ironman triathlete. Talk about stamina. We're excited to tap into Rafik's wealth of experience today, understanding consumer intelligence in the Arab world and how to make it more inclusive. Rafik, welcome to the Consumer Connections podcast.
Rafik, it's really good to have you here. Before we get going at all, though, we want to start with a little quiz, and you're going to be the judge. Oh. And the whole quiz revolves around the fact that when we talk about PepsiCo, we think of a soft drink, but Pepsi's more than soft drinks. So, Faisal, we're going to put you to the test.
Okay, you're putting me on a spot here.
Yeah, we're going to put you on the spot. I want you to name 6 products that fall under the Pepsi banner.
6 is actually not as difficult.
And you have
I think I can do
7
better than
seconds.
That. Okay. So it's Pepsi, Mirinda, Mountain Dew, 7-Up.
Oh, those are all beverages.
Okay.
4.
Lays, Doritos, Cheetos, Tasali, Sunbites, Barbican.
Nope.
No. Oh, no. Monster used to be one of the...
Nope.
Oh, my God. Gatorade?
Yeah.
Gatorade's there.
I think you did 7. You did more than 7.
I mean, as I said, it's great to have you here. You've been at Pepsi for 18 years. I mean, that's an extraordinary amount of time. The amount of change you've seen is incredible. But people don't necessarily realize like all of the different products that Pepsi has under the umbrella.
We're actually super lucky with the brands that we have in the portfolio. We have, I think, over 20 brands that have retail sales of over $1 billion annually. You mentioned a few, Faisal, our beverage brands, carbonated soft drinks, Pepsi, 7-Up, Dew. But we also have Gatorade, Aquafina, water, and Rockstar, energy drinks, so a lot on the beverage side. There's also our snacks portfolio. So I think, again, Faisal, you mentioned a few. A lot of people don't realize that Quaker Oats is actually
Quaker,
a PepsiCo.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Quite important in our portfolio, plays in the nutrition space. And there's a lot more.
Yeah.
I mean, this must become a real challenge for you that when we're talking about insights and we're talking about analytics and you've got this vast portfolio that has different touch points. How do you manage all that?
It's a super fun company to work for. The region where we operate, so I cover Africa, Middle East, and South Asia, is a super exciting region as well. There's a lot that's happening. There's a lot that's developing. And I'm lucky. I have a role where my job and my team is to understand the consumer trends, guide business on fun brands. So we do that in a lot of ways. We have studies that we do that are ongoing, market trends that we buy and read, but also talk to humans, talk to consumers, shoppers, and understand how they interact with our brands.
With so many brands, is there anything that links all of them together, or is it like is it viewed in very much like all of them are viewed with silos in a different perspective, or is it something that really ties them all together?
So if you look at the PepsiCo vision, it's to be a leader in beverages and convenient foods, and doing, as we were talking earlier, winning with PepsiCo Positive, so sustainability at the center of what we do. So it's beverages and convenient foods, and that's the area where we operate in. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
How do you at PepsiCo deal with the regionality? You know, Saudi Arabia is very different than the United Arab Emirates. How do you deal with that?
We believe in understanding local insights for our local markets, the markets where we serve. So we get very granular. So we have the studies that we do that are market by market. We talk to consumers in each of those markets. This is a super exciting time for this region and Saudi in specific, the change that's happening, the transformation in the country. And again, we're super lucky. We got a chance to be at the center of that, talking to consumers, understanding the aspirations of youth, understanding where the country is going, and how we can serve our consumers there better. It's just a super exciting time.
Rafik, you talk about excitement, and I think that's absolutely correct, especially with what's the changes that are coming in Saudi. But Saudi is changing very, very fast, like extremely quickly from the last 10 years to now. It's changed drastically, and every trip I make to Saudi, every 6 months, every 1 year, I can visibly see a difference in terms of cultural differences, societal, economical differences. And while it's exciting, there's a lot for you to cope from a consumer understanding perspective, because with that speed, I don't know how you manage with it, but it must be overwhelming for you.
We, again, try to be very close to the consumers that we serve, to the humans that we serve, and understand those trends. We don't do this once every few years. This is our day job, right? So we do it every day. We're in the market. We have loved brands that we continue to nurture and make sure that they're relevant for our consumers. And we have regular connections, whether it's the kind of qualitative work that we do, whether it's how we listen to our consumers through social media, whether it's quantitative studies and understanding data of how consumers are interacting with our brands. So it is a good challenge, but we're keep the hand on the pulse.
So would it be safe to assume, because you keep talking about continuous understanding, is it that the frequency of understanding and being in touch with the consumer has increased or has become much more important today than it was a few years back with the changes happening?
Absolutely. So I think in the past, doing things every few years and assuming those insights are valid for longer periods is now changing. Things have become much faster. We're also ambitious, and we have plans, and the way we communicate with consumers, we need to definitely keep the finger on the pulse and understand those trends, making sure our brands are culturally relevant and attracting the consumers in the right way.
Over the 18 years that you've been doing this, have you found that consumers have become more informed, more conscientious? Have the consumers changed in your time?
I think this is valid across the world, right? So it's not just in our region. People have become much more aware, information at the fingertips, interaction with brands, expectation from brands. And we see this in the region as well. So in the past, if you think long back, you used to have sort of a one-way communication with your consumer, and you used to put an ad, and that's how you communicate. And now the interactions with consumers, with the humans that we serve, is very much a two-way. You hear back the responses immediately, and there's that ongoing communication between the brands and the consumers.
It's an interesting point, because in our first discussion we were having with the head of digital at Arla, and she was like, consumers actually expect for a brand to understand you and to be targeted right with the right tonality. And if you don't target them right, they're actually wondering, they haven't done their research, they're not connecting with us. So they'll become very aware in terms of that communications become very strong, and there is an expectation today for them to kind of talk to us, understand us. And I think it works for research. Actually, it's good for research that way, because you're getting much more richer responses, and you have more clarity also on what's running in their mind.
And the way you interact with consumers. So in the past, it used to be mass media.
Right.
Now it's much more personalized, and personalized messages are basically the hygiene factor.
Right.
It's no longer one message that goes out to everyone. You definitely need to understand your audience and deliver a message that's relevant to them, from their interests to who they are, right?
Yes.
It makes the whole area so exciting, because it's rapidly changing. It's not stagnant. It's not just we do the same thing every day. That's got to be a lot of fun.
So he's got a 2-layer complexity. One, multiple categories and brands within those categories and a changing environment and bringing those together. I can only imagine. I never want to be in a position like that to kind of work around that.
But that's been an evolution, right? So we talk about it as if it was a switch, but it's actually evolved over time. We've learned along the way. Consumers are learning how to interact with brands through all the different touch points, share feedback, and it's been a continuous evolution. And as you look into the future, it will continue to evolve, and in certain aspects, it's actually going to get much more fun, let's say.
If you were to crystal ball gaze a little bit, where do you see that fun going? As you talked about, it's going to get more fun.
I think that definitely that aspect of personalized messages is going to become a norm, right? So you're going to expect brands to communicate with you in a one-to-one way, in a way that shows that they understand you as for who you are. Communication is one, but also product offerings. I think I'm not talking specific industry, but in general, a lot of industries will have to evolve to be offering personalized propositions as well. And
which is a big change for some brands. That's going to be a huge pivot.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And how does that impact from a research perspective, from a consumer insights perspective, with things getting more personalized? How do you see research changing in that context?
I think that the need for us to stay on trend, understand those trends ahead. We used to always, as an industry, talk about the past. Right?
Correct.
And then we started to get a little better and talk about just the very recent past, right? Correct. The expectation is to talk about the future.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's how the industry is evolving. It's no longer good to reflect on what happened, but it's how do you guide organizations on and brands and the partners that you work with on what's going to happen in the future. And it's not easy. The future is not one. There are certain scenarios, but putting those scenarios together, picking a most likely scenario, and continuing to evolve the capability to be able to do that.
No, I think that's an excellent way you've put it, because it's being in the industry for so many years, I've not been able to articulate it that way. But how it's evolved from looking at the past and everything research was always in retrospect, and maybe till some time back, okay, this is what's happening. But now it's really about being prepared for what's really going to come in the next 1 year, in the next 6 months, and having things ready from a product perspective, from a proposition perspective, from a communication perspective. And I think that's a very well way put.
It used to be fine with the pace of how things went, right? So when brands, again, I'm talking a bit in the past, when brands put 1 or 2 big campaigns a year, consumers, the propositions that were available to them were more or less the same, and with 1 or 2 additions in the year in a category. Now things have evolved, and as we talk about the future, are going to continue to evolve in a much faster way.
I love the way you've reinforced a common theme that's throughout this podcast is fundamentals are still really important, but layering on the fundamentals are these new tools. But if you don't have the fundamentals, you don't have anything.
At the end of the day, our job is a super fun job of understanding the consumer that you're serving, the human that you're serving, and making sure that whatever you're offering is relevant to them, whether it's the message or the product, the new product that you're offering, the package, the price point. So we're in a fun in a fun industry talking to humans. Yeah.
I have these conversations in our community of researchers, insights people, and one of the things is coming up also very frequently is there used to be like one-time research, two-time research, you talked about it, and even the modes of research used to be a typical qualitative research, quantitative research, doing a couple of groups. And there was that much data which was very much digestible. Now you're thrown with a lot of data because your frequency of research has increased, your sources of data has increased. Right? You've mentioned social media, you talked about perhaps reviews, ratings, you talked about the continuing trends researches, and of course the regular traditional stuff that was happening. Are you overwhelmed with the quantum of data that comes your way, and then how do you decide and navigate through that in terms of what do I need to use and not use?
That's a good question. So it all starts with what you're trying to solve for. There's a lot of data that's available. There's a lot of data that you can collect. But what are you trying to do with that data? And the use of that data is actually what drives where you look and how you draw patterns, right?
Okay.
To give you a few examples,
Yeah.
for instance, wanting to understand execution in store, you can collect a lot of pictures, right? Now we use technology to generate data from those pictures so that it becomes something that you can read as data, and then you can guide the execution in the store of what you do, again, to serve your shopper better in a easier way for them to pick up your product, right? You can look at a lot of data to generate new concepts, right? Again, if you're clear that what your use case is about, getting to a concept, you look at a certain kind of data, talk to certain kinds of consumers that will guide you to that.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is the clarity of the brief becomes much more important in today's environment, and what you're trying to do, what you're solving is what you said. And if you have a very clear picture on what you're solving for, then you're going to choose which data point, either existing or kind of a new data source that you kind of look at, but address that issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So AI, the big two letters that everyone's talking about because of generative AI that's suddenly in our face, but it's been around for a while, as you know. With the advancements that are happening right now, is this unlocking some very interesting potential in your own research?
We are actually using AI in a lot of use cases, not necessarily generative AI yet, but AI in general. And it's like any technology. It's how you use it, what you use it for, what sort of guardrails you have around it. So the examples I was giving about image recognition and understanding what's the execution in the store, that's powered by technology that's AI, right? We for communication that we're putting out, we test a lot of that communication in the digital world through AI to make sure that it's relevant to give you the effective reach on digital channels. And there's also how we put our data or the insights together on a platform that our teams can access, again, powered by AI, so that when they're searching, they're finding the relevant answers for them to build new briefs or to advance the work, right? So in short, we've been using AI. We will continue to use it. It's going to continue to evolve, and it's going to get into more and more use cases.
Pepsi's always been at the forefront of these things. So when you say AI, it's like, we've been doing it for years. It's like business as usual. I want to stick to one point that you talked about, and I think that's it's an important aspect, because you talked about inclusivity of data. You just mentioned that the end stakeholders also have access to data. So technology is allowing them to access data directly. And that whole thing about and discussions around democratization of data, and the fact that data and insight should be accessible on each table. Do you see that growing? And if you do see that as growing, then where does the role of insights people then fit in? If data is with everyone, insights is with everyone on everyone's desk.
No, not at all. I think big organizations do a lot of work, and that work in the past used to sit in different places in the organization, right? Being able to gather those insights, gather those reports in a way that is accessible by the full organization. It's knowing what you know, right? And it just makes it much more powerful for the organization to be able to access that in a simplified way, to build extra briefs and extra understanding to what's there, right? So I think that the accessibility is sort of a standard now.
Okay.
And it just allows everyone to be better informed, build better briefs. Maybe not even have to brief, because the answer is there. They've seen it in a number of other markets. It's clear that the answer they were looking for is there, and they don't need to ask the question anymore. So it just makes us better at asking better questions, better briefs, and building on what we know versus starting from scratch every time.
How do you work with your team to instill that? I mean, asking the better questions, but not getting blinded by this enormous amount of data. Because we've talked to numerous folks who are in the field of insights, and they've said they've had that great example where we've got all this data and we did all this stuff, and then we realized, why did we ask this question to start with? Like, there was no point to this.
Yeah, I think we're driving that approach of, before we ask a new question, as a new brief, examining what we have, right? And that's just giving us better return on investments we did in the past on gathering these insights, right? So we're trying to make it a standard way of approaching new questions. Let's first see what we have, and not necessarily in the current market, but maybe in other markets and in similar markets across the world, and then build and layer the questions on top of what we know already. So again, in the past, every question developed into a brief, and you went and did specific kind of work. Now we first start by looking at what's available within our world, and the technology allows that quick access.
Okay.
Again, if you think a few years back, the way you would have done that is build your network, send a question on email, waited a few days, hoping that people responded with a relevant answer, and then if you all had that initiative, you would then layer on top of that. Now it's as simple as opening your browser and logging into a platform and asking the question, and you get a lot of answers that not takes you to a study, it takes you to the page on the study that tells you exactly the answer that you're asking, right? So,
and is that good news or bad news for agencies, research agencies that are out there? If you have a lot of internal access to data that's just lying there, and you're getting better and better at it, and perhaps every day developing internal capabilities,
I think it just makes it overall better, right? No, you can think of, those questions could have developed into briefs that give agencies a certain amount of work. But if you're at the agency and you're getting the same question over and over the years because people changed or because the organization doesn't have that memory, it's not going to be fulfilling work, right?
Correct.
And it's not going to be fulfilling kind of projects to work on. Like, we answered this question 5 years ago.
That's actually true.
They're still asking that question again. So I think on the whole, I think it's better for the industry.
At home.
It's better that we know what we know. We learn incremental insights, how things have evolved versus asking similar questions over the years. Yeah.
I guess it forces the agencies also to really be thinking about, okay, how can we add value to what you're doing? What do we have that you're not doing in-house that we can work complementary?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So agencies also have that role of looking into the future, developing technologies, adopting technologies, and giving the access. At the end of the day, where you're getting those accesses, whether those are through platforms, they're perhaps agencies where you're getting that from. So it just, like you said, the industry at a whole is benefiting and moving ahead.
I've got a very different question, but it relates to new recruits to your organization who you're working with. The newest batch of recruits who would be coming in are digital natives. How is that changing the way they think about research and insights?
I think there are common themes. Everyone in Insights has a certain level of curiosity, whether it was offline in the past or online today. A certain passion for consumers, a certain passion for understanding humans, a certain passion for driving brands forward in a positive way. But in general, the newer generation have different expectations from the workplace, and not just specifically Insights, right?
Is that a challenge to work with?
I think I wouldn't call it a challenge. It's something that we have to evolve with. I'm not talking about my current employer. I think about my teenagers. I have 2 teenagers, and I think about them and their experience as they enter the workforce. It's definitely not gonna be my experience when I started working a couple of decades ago.
And actually, for you as an individual, also you have to constantly then learn technology and I guess adopt technology and upskill yourself in many ways. Do you do a lot of that, or is it like?
Absolutely. I'm lucky in the position that I'm in the organization that I'm in, that we adopt technologies and we're you feel it's you're learning as you go, but you do have to make a conscious effort to stay current. And we're talking today about AI. Probably a couple of years ago, we talked about AI. Everyone felt a little bit uncomfortable. What does it exactly mean? What is the
trust me, they still do. They still feel uncomfortable.
And even today. Yeah,
I
right.
mean, you come from an organization where very quick to adopt technology has always been on the forefront. You personally have that interest, but you still have conversations, and they struggle to understand the capabilities of AI and what it is all about.
Absolutely. So I think just in general, in any organization, spending time advancing your knowledge is just critical for you to be in this kind of workforce, in this kind of environment where actually I think it's going to be funny if you listen to this podcast like in a couple of years and just imagine they were talking about AI as if it's something that's, like you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
It's going to be like a super funny kind of listen, because it's just going to be another tool that enables a lot of functionalities. And they
I posted a video a few days back. It was a group of 3 people on the newsroom. I think it was a BBC, CNN, talking about the WWW. And I'm like,
very similar.
I was laughing at it. I was like, what are they talking about?
Calculators, the scientific calculator hasn't been around for that long. I think you're right. A couple of years down the road, what we were talking about? What? It's not even an issue.
Our organizations also, what I hear, is also developing while your core business remains to be food, beverages, and in the nutrition space. But let's say, from a research standpoint, internal capabilities to be self-dependent when it comes to research and insights.
Yeah, we have great partnerships, and we continue to foster those partnerships. But we realize in certain areas we want to build internal capability and make sure that the insights that we gather, we have full control on. It feeds into our system that I was talking about earlier. That you know what you know. It's not just with your partners, and access to it becomes a little bit distant. So we're definitely building internal capabilities. Some of it in partnership, and some of it in purely internal.
Can you think of any examples where the insights have led one way, but when things were implemented from those insights, it was a totally different way, and you kind of were left scratching your head going, how did we get this wrong?
I'm struggling to think of an example, to be honest.
That's good. That shows how perfect a researcher Rafik is, and I vouch for that. I've worked with him a lot.
I'm not trying to say that, but I just can't think of an example.
Or the other way to ask it. But if there are any other examples you can think of.
Yeah, so the Tasali is a good example. Is a potato chips brand that we have in Saudi Arabia. It has a lot of history, very relevant for Saudis. And you see the communication that you're referring to is just very in touch with Saudis, the heritage, on trend, and that's all powered by consumer insights, right?
I mean, it's the power of consumer insights. If you're getting it right and asking the right questions, it's not just about looking at the data. It's also about looking and talking to the people to get those touch points.
I think the word that comes to mind is listening, right? Is really listening and internalizing what consumers are telling you, to then translate that in a way that is relevant for them. Yeah.
That listening's from everywhere. Talking to them, like you said, their interactions with you directly on social media. Let's say how they're behaving, or leaving reviews and ratings. So I guess listening through all those places, and then finding the ones that make most impact for you to kind of take your decisions what the business case you're solving for.
As we started this conversation, we did mention that you're a triathlete, you've done Ironmans. What got you into that?
That's how long do we have? Well, that's a really interesting question. Actually, again, fortunate. I got into it through work. And for those, again, we mentioned that Gatorade, the sports drink, is part of the PepsiCo portfolio. And when I joined PepsiCo, I was working on Gatorade. We were testing Gatorade with consumers in the regions. And the way to test it is people have to be a little bit thirsty, sweaty to enjoy the Gatorade and for it to be effective. It's a sports drink that replenishes your sweat. So the protocol was for consumers to, or like our respondents, to run for a certain amount of time, then try one variant of the product, run again for another 20 minutes, and then try a second variant. And that idea stuck in my mind, like I need to find people at a big group that will run for 40 minutes. And that was like, is that possible? And I got into running, and so my first objective was to get to 20 minutes. When I got to 20 minutes, was close enough to get to maybe a 5K local race. From then, the journey started, got into longer distance races, and then transitioned to triathlons.
Fantastic. And I love the link back to the Gatorade, back to work. It's like, very holistic, very interesting.
Yeah, there's a rich consumer insight in there.
Yeah, there is,
It could be an
exactly.
entire communication series around just Rafik being the brand ambassador of Gatorade.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun, Rafik. Really, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure and a nice chat.
Thank you, Rafik. Thanks.
You have been listening to Consumer Connections, a podcast series brought to you by Scylla. The theme of this podcast was democratizing consumer intelligence in a fast-evolving Arab region. Our guest, Rafik El Noumeir, VP of Insights and Analytics for PepsiCo.